This is the Marketing Podcast Network.
Stories influence, teach, and inspire us. But what about the storytellers who create them? Uncorking a Story profiles storytellers to uncover how their background and life experiences influence the stories they create. We learn what motivates them, their path to success, and what fuels them to keep creating. It all starts by asking one simple question: where does your story begin? Welcome to Uncorking a Story. Now here's your host, Mike Carlin.
Hello and welcome to Uncorking a Story. I'm your host, Mike Carlin, and today I'm excited to introduce you to Lyn Liao Butler. Lyn was born in Taiwan and moved to the States when she was 7. Before becoming an author, she was a professional ballet and modern dancer and is still a personal trainer, fitness instructor, and yoga instructor. She joins me today on Uncorking a Story to talk about her latest novel, Someone Else's Life. Welcome to Uncorking a Story, Lyn Liao Butler.
Hi, thank you for having me.
I'm curious, where does your story as an author begin?
Not like most people. Like you said in the bio, I was a professional ballet and modern dancer in New York City, and also a yoga instructor, fitness instructor, and personal trainer. When I moved out of the city in 2013, I just moved to the suburbs, and my friends in the city is like, "Oh, what are you doing in the country?" It's like, I don't live in the country, it's the suburbs. So I started a blog to keep them posted of, like my daily life and stories from my life. And they just one day I think it was 2015, I woke up on January 1st and said, you know what, I'm going to write a book. And I'd never taken a writing course. I'd never taken any writing classes. I just decided I was going to write a book. And I wrote a book in 6 months. Nobody read it. And I started querying it because I didn't know that, you're supposed to have people read it and critique it. And I knew nothing about writing a book. And I sent it out. And now I'm just very embarrassed at what I sent out to agents at that point.
Well, we all make those mistakes first time out of the gate. I mean, there are things I sent out to agents that shouldn't have been sent to anybody, even people who knew me and would have lied to tell me it was good, so.
Yeah, like I cringe now to think that, and actually 5 agents requested it. And I'm just like cringing now to think of it. It was all telling. There was no story, no plot. It was just kind of a bunch of stories thrown together. So yeah, it was pretty bad.
So what did you learn coming out from that first experience?
So after that, I was like, why am I not getting any requests? So I started to Google, like, thank goodness for the internet now, because, you can just look up anything. And I started Googling how to query agents and, how to write a query letter. I realized, I was doing everything wrong. So I joined 2 critique groups and finally had people actually read the book and read pieces of it. I found my critique partner actually on Twitter. She lives in Germany. We connected. I joined like some writing groups. And basically, I just did everything that I should have done before I actually sent out a query, which is find a writing community, find some critique partners, beta readers, learn as much about the craft as possible. I still have never taken a writing course, but I did take my favorite books and dissected them. Like I basically broke them down and see, okay, where was the climax? Where was the hook? Where did she start leaving clues? At what point in the book do you drop the first hint? And so I dissected these books, and that's basically how I learned how to write a book.
I mean, that's probably the best way to learn how to write a book. It's almost like learning how to do comedy.
Right.
You don't learn by taking a class in stand-up comedy. You learn by watching other performers and then, getting the nerve up and seeing what works and what doesn't work when you're on stage.
Yep.
So tell me about this book. Tell me about Someone Else's Life. What can you share with us about it?
So Someone Else's Life started off, my first 2 books are what they call upmarket fiction, which is like, book club fiction, women's fiction. And the 3rd book was supposed to be in that same vein. It was supposed to be like family, about families and stuff like that. And I wrote it during the pandemic, 2021. We had come to, I'm actually in Kauai right now as we speak. We had come to Kauai in 2021 during the pandemic because we're like, if we're going to have to shelter in place, let's just do it in paradise. So it was like the best decision we made. Like I just on a whim said to my husband, I want to set this book in Kauai. We need to go and do research. There's no COVID on Kauai. They weren't letting people in. So let's go. And we were lucky because 3 days before we left, they lifted the 14-day quarantine that you had to be in a hotel room for. And we were able to stay in a resort bubble with he was 8 years old at the time, with our son. And we tested out after 3 days, and then we just lived in paradise. And I wrote this book, but I was doing pandemic homeschooling, and it was the worst thing I have ever done in my life. And after 5 weeks, my 8-year-old said to me, like, "Mommy, I retire from your school." He didn't quit. He retired. He was 8 years old. He retired. I was like, "You're 8. You can't retire." And seriously, by 10:26 every morning, I needed a drink. And I'm not a day drinker. So that just tells you how bad it was. So I was in a really bad, state of mind, the pandemic, whatever. And I started killing people in the book. It was supposed to be about a woman who lost everything, and she moves to Hawaii to start over, and she discovers herself and whatever. But I started killing people, and then there was a stalker, and then there was accidental murder, and then intentional murder. And then all of a sudden my agent was like, "Lyn, this is not upmarket family, novel. This is like a thriller. You're killing people." And I was like, "Oh, you're right. I think I wrote a thriller." So that's why I call it my accidental thriller. And it just was even more better that it took place in Kauai in the middle of a storm, because you have this beautiful, background, and then all this sinister stuff starts to happen. And so we made it into a thriller, and my agent sold it on 3 chapters and a synopsis in 2 weeks. Wow. And I suddenly had to learn how to write a thriller in 6 weeks, because they wanted it in 6 weeks.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. I had written the whole book as upmarket, like a Amy Tan type of book. And then I had to tear it apart and figure out how to turn it into a thriller in 6 weeks. And yeah.
Were you or your agent nervous at all about switching genres like that? Kind of, you being known for something and then throwing, your readers a curveball.
Yeah. So at the point when it turned into a thriller, my debut hadn't even come out yet. And so I had a 2-book deal with Berkeley for my first 2 books. And she's like, they're marketing you as an upmarket book club fiction, and you can't suddenly switch to thriller without your debut even coming out. But then she read it. She was like, "You know what? This is a thriller. So we will just go out as a thriller." She didn't ask me to change my, do a pen name, because she said, as a woman of color, it's so hard for us to get our name out there anyways, that it would be diluting our brand. So she went out. My new editor was completely fine with me keeping it, because I guess it was close enough, because in my books, there is some sort of thriller elements, even though it's like upmarket fiction. So they thought it was close enough. But then I wrote a rom-com, and that's when my agent's like, "Okay, now you need a pen name."
So do you have a rom-com coming out under a pen name?
I do. So on June 6th, I have a rom-com called Crazy Bao Yu coming out, which I'm writing under just Lyn Liao, which is my maiden name. So we took out the Butler and so I'm like John Cougar Mellencamp. I'm like Lyn Liao Butler, Lyn Butler. So maybe I'll write a fantasy under Lyn Butler or something,
Lyn Cougar Butler.
Yeah, Lyn Cougar Butler. There we go.
There you go. Just borrow from John Mellencamp. Exactly. The pride of Indiana.
Exactly.
Well, tell me, so kind of big life changes, right? So you kind of leave the city, you leave your career. Now you're working as sort of an author. And although I know you still, do some, training and yoga and all that, but how has your life changed since making these big moves?
Well, so I am basically writing almost full time. I used to be a business owner too. I actually opened a gym and fitness studio in Manhattan for 10 years while I was dancing. Don't ask me how I did it. It was the worst decision I've ever made in my life, because I was running this big business by myself in the city. So I was working like 24 hours a day. I was doing payroll at 2 a.m, dancing, rehearsing in the day, running this gym. I had 35 employees. So my life was just one big stressful hell. And so a lot of someone else's life is based on that experience, because in the book, a woman who, was really busy, had a dance studio, she loses everything. And, then she becomes depressed and then they decide to move to Kauai to start over. We didn't quite do that, but it was based on that time. So now I am so much more relaxed. I'm living my best life. I mean, look at me. I'm here in Kauai doing book work. I write mostly full time. I still do teach like 6 to 7 yoga fitness classes a week. I have an Etsy shop that I sew for at night. And so it's a really good balance of, when I get writer's block, sorry, there's an ambulance out here. If I start to get writer's block, I stop writing immediately, and I go and I either torture people in a fitness class, or I everybody in a yoga class. And then like my creative well is full again, and I come back. So I never write unless I know I have something to write, which is why I never have writer's block. I just go do something else. And the sewing is like meditation to me. So it's like, once I've had enough of people at night, I sew. And then we have 3 dogs, which we actually fostered 18 dogs during the pandemic. So it was quite, and we only foster failed twice. So we had 1 dog before. So now we have 3 dogs. We almost end up with 4, but I put my foot down and said to my child, I was like, we cannot have a 4th dog. So yeah, so I'm living my best life right now, I have to say.
I will observe you are someone who likes to have a lot of irons in the fire, it seems.
Yes, I am a multitasker, and if I'm not doing 5 things at one time, I feel like something's missing. So yeah.
Well, I know there are a few things important to you in your books. One of them is bringing Taiwanese American characters into your books. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I was born in Taiwan. So as a Taiwanese American, a lot of people don't even know what Taiwan is. Like, I've said to people, oh, I was born in Taiwan. They're like, oh, I love Thai food. And I'm like, no, that's Thailand. I was born in Taiwan, completely different country. And they still don't get it. Like, this just happened to me the other day. And they were asking me like, oh, what's your favorite Thai food? I'm like, well, I love Thai food, but so I feel like it's really important now, especially with all the different representation that's coming out, that people know a little bit more about what Taiwan is, and that Taiwan and China are not necessarily synonymous depending on who you speak with. So I'm trying to bring that Taiwanese American perspective into novels, hopefully. And there are starting to become more authors out there who are Taiwanese American, and I love connecting with them because, a lot of people don't realize what it is. So as a thriller book, there's not very many thrillers out there from Asian perspectives, let alone Taiwanese Americans. So a lot of the reviews I got is like, was really interesting to see this point of view from, a different culture. So I think it's important to bring it into all genres.
Yeah. And you mentioned, food
Yes.
in your example, but it's also important for you to bring food in your books as well. Tell me why.
Yeah, because in Taiwan, food means everything. Like, all Taiwanese people do is eat. There are night markets, day markets, like you're always eating, and it's like the best food you'll ever had. And it's not, they don't have a lot of Taiwanese food in the States. There used to be some in Flushing, New York. There was a Taiwanese like community there, but they all moved out. But it is so good. And in Taiwan, you can't think about Taiwan without thinking about food. So unknowingly, my first book, the Tiger Mom's Tale, I didn't even know that I wrote about food until all the reviews started coming back, and people were like, I'm so hungry, I want to try this food, I need to go to Taiwan now. And they all thought I did that on purpose. I was like, no, because in Taiwanese culture, food is synonymous with family, getting together. Everything you do is about food. My husband is Irish American. And I took him there in I think it was 2017, to research for that debut book. And after like a week, he goes, is this all we're going to do is just eat? Are we going to go sightseeing? I'm like, no sightseeing. We're just going to eat our way through Taiwan. He's like, no temples, those monuments. I was like, no, we're just going to eat. And he's like, how do you guys stay so skinny? Like, he's like, you eat like 3 times the amount I do. I'm like, I don't know. We just eat. So yeah, so food is very important.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it's so subconscious, right? If you don't even know that you're writing, putting all this food in there, it's just part of you. It's part of you and the culture.
Yes, exactly. And it's actually an insult if you go into a Chinese household and you don't eat the food they give you. They take it very personally. So my mom, like when she first met my husband, was like plying him with food, and he's like, I can't eat anymore. And she was getting insulted. She's like, oh, it's not good. And I was like, and he's like, I'm so full. So yeah.
So if I were to walk into your mom's house, what is an example of a dish that she would try to serve me?
Well, so my dad is the chef in the family. They both are very good cooks, but my dad loves to cook. He would make you like niu rou mian, which is beef noodle soup. It's a staple of Taiwanese food. It is so good, and like this rich broth with homemade hand pulled noodles and vegetables. So that would be one thing. He loves to make his fried rice, which is completely different from the fried rice that you get in in America.
Mhm.
And my mom makes these most amazing dumplings and wontons and, all from hand. I think I even did a video of how to make a wonton from scratch for my second book or something. But yeah, they'll give you all this and then there's something called rogan or baki, which is my favorite. It's a thick soup. And I mean, there's so many different oyster pancakes and stinky tofu. They don't make stinky tofu, but you get that in the night markets, which is really stinky, but it's really good. So, and he'll make a whole bunch of things that you don't even know what it is, and you're and he would just be like, just eat it.
They probably don't want to know what's in there.
No, you don't want to know. It's all really good.
I'm sure. Well, one of the ways I like to get to know my guests a little bit more is through pop culture. So, Lyn, I'm curious, when you were growing up, what were some of your favorite things to watch on TV? If you had any favorite things to watch on TV?
Well, so I grew up, I guess I came to the States in, I think, the 80s. So the first things we knew was, Sesame Street and Mr. Rogers, huge Mr. Rogers fan. And then there was we weren't allowed to watch Three's Company because it was racy, but my parents watched, they watched it at night while we were sleeping, but my sister and I would sneak it. But it's Little House on the Prairie. I wanted to be Nellie Olson because back then, I looked different and I went to an basically all white school. And I was like, I want, curly blonde hair like Nellie Olson in Little House on the Prairie. The Brady Bunch, I wanted to be one of the Brady Bunch kids, they're all blonde. And this is why I think that representation matters, because at that time, every ideal girl that I saw was blonde. Mm-hmm. Saved by the Bell. Although Tiffany in that movie,
that's right. That's Kelly Kapowski was not blonde haired.
She was brunette. So that was the first brunette I saw. And then I wanted to be her. Saved by the Bell. So it was all those. I mean, we watched a lot of TV because we were learning how to speak English. Yeah. And my parents were like, that's the best way. Just throw you in front of TV and you kind of absorb it. So it is true. We learned a lot of English from watching TV shows and sitcoms like that. Growing Pains. What's the one with John Stamos? Full House.
Full House.
Yeah. So I was an 80s, 90s child.
I think it's so funny because I remember Three's Company in the original run. Right. I just think it's so funny how that is considered or was considered racy television at the time.
Right.
Because looking at it now, it's oh my gosh, this is nothing compared to, what. It's
so tame, right?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, what he's got two roommates who are women and he's got to pretend to be gay. It's just, it's a premise.
Yeah.
It was silly, but it's a premise that wouldn't make sense in today's day and age.
Right, exactly.
But funny nonetheless, I was talking to somebody recently and we were talking about where would we like to go hang out for, if we could pick out all the different fictional bars that we've seen in TV and movies, where would we like to hang out? The Regal Beagle was at the top of my list. I would totally hang out at the Regal Beagle.
I would too. Yes. Very racy,
yeah, exactly. That's right. How about music? What did you grow up listening to?
We did. So my parents were, obviously Taiwanese, so they did not know anything about music. So I grew up just from my friends, listening. And we used to have this tape and I pulled it out the other day. I can't remember half the old songs, give me some 80s music. Cause I can't remember.
Oh, 80s pop music or?
Yeah. 80s, those ballads, those really dramatic, I can't remember, Heart or something. Is that her name?
Oh, Little Heart. Sure. Heart. The Wilson sisters. Yes.
Yeah. The Wilson. And then the one from that movie Mannequin, there was a song in there.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's going to drive me nuts. I can hear the keyboards. I can hear the keyboards playing in the background.
Dramatic and that's so it was all kind of Latin, was it Don McLean?
Don McLean, American Pie.
That was our prom song for some reason.
That's an interesting choice for a prom song.
That was our senior year prom song, I think. So stuff like that. It wasn't rock. It was more the ballads, those things that tend to make you cry, which I cannot for the life of me remember the name of, but I still remember that tape, that mix that we made.
Well, I cheated, and the song from Mannequin was Starships. Nothing's gonna stop us
That's
now.
it. So stuff like that, like cheesy stuff like that. That was what I grew up listening to.
Yeah. Since you've started writing and now you're writing pretty much full time. Tell me what big lessons have you learned about yourself as you've invested more time in writing?
Well, so I thought I had a very thick skin because as a ballet dancer, I would go to cattle, they call them cattle calls. I don't know if they do anymore, but when I was dancing, it's just like hundreds of girls vying for like one or two spots. And they literally go through and say, you're too fat, you're too tall, you're too short, you're too Asian, and just weed you out like that. And, they'd be like, great dancing, you can't sing, out. And it was just like, and then like all the directors, for some reason, they were all male and they were all like yelling in your face, like, you're too fat. You need to eat like a third of what's left on your plate. You are not allowed to drink juice. I would just remember one time this director marching around going like this, saying, you all look like big fat white elephants, move to the back, like go upstage. Like he didn't want us to come downstage. And we're all like, well, why'd you put us in a white costume if you think? So it was like a lot of that kind of stuff. So I thought I had a very thick skin. So when I became an author, I started reading my reviews, even though everybody told me not to. And at first they made me laugh because some people were cruel. They like write paragraphs and novels about how much they hated your book, which I took as a compliment at first, because I'm like, if I made somebody feel that much, even if it's negative, it obviously impacted them enough that they wrote an entire book. And then some of them just got really cruel. Like they, say things that they would never say to someone to their face. And then I finally decided, you know what, maybe I should stop reading these reviews, because then they start to mess with their head and like, okay, they say I suck, I'm not a writer, I should go back, find another job. So that was one thing that I finally stopped doing. Like I'll skim the Amazon page just to see how the ratings are going. And I see the bad reviews, but I try to scroll through them, even though sometimes you can't help it and, it jumps out at you. But all you can do is laugh about it, because I know not everybody loves your book, but I bet you 99% of those people would never say what they wrote in a review to my face.
Oh no, it's the comfort of the keyboard.
Exactly.
It's the keyboard warriors. They're the same people who flame other people on Twitter.
Right.
It's like,
Exactly. And a lot of it is probably frustrated writers who are not getting anywhere, and they see a book that they hated being sold and published in bestsellers list, so they need to tear it down because they're like, why is that book out there and I can't get my work out there?
right.
So I get it. So that's why I'm like, you know what, they're more than welcome to their opinions, but I will stay away from this from now on.
Yeah, it's probably better for your
So I don't read reviews anymore, good or bad. I just especially with someone else's life, because it was Amazon's first reads, which is when you get it for free if you're a Prime member. And with the thousands of ratings out there, a lot of people felt the need to say, how bad it was because it was a free book. So I stay away now.
stay away. It's better for your mental health.
Exactly.
And if you could go back in time and whisper some words into advice into the younger Lyn's ears, what would you tell your younger self?
You mean about writing?
About anything, about life in general,
Oh.
thinking about all that you've learned, about yourself now. What would you tell your younger self?
I would say, if you believe in something and you truly, truly enjoy something, don't give up, or at least not that don't give up, because sometimes you do have to, but if you're going to give up, or if you're really love something and it's not getting where, give it all you got. Like if you're going to fail spectacularly. Like I always say this to people, because I did that. It took me 3.5 years and 3 manuscripts to sign with an agent. And by the time I wrote that third book, I was like done. I was like, I can't do this anymore. I'm not making any money. I'm wasting all this time and energy. And I said, you know what, I'm going to go out with a bang. So I entered every single contest I could think of, like Pitch Wars, Rev Pit. I entered Pit Mad, DV Pit, whatever it's called. A lot of these agents were giving away free query critiques, with things. So I entered all that. I got critique partners. I had so many people read it. And then I researched the hell out of the agents and narrowed down like which ones I wanted. So I basically said, if I'm going to fail, I'm going to go out in a blaze of glory. And then that way I can look back and not regret not having tried. Like I did everything I could. I couldn't get there. So that meant my path was something else. So yeah, because I wasted a lot of time in the past, like afraid to try something or to go for something because, it didn't work. And if I hadn't done that last push of blade, to fail spectacularly, I wouldn't have signed with my agent. I would have quit too early and then probably regretted it later on.
Yeah, the Blaze of Glory, of course, another great Bon Jovi song. But
yeah, there we go. Oh yeah, Bon Jovi's another big one we listen to.
But there is this. I mean, your work will get you an agent, but also your passion will help you find an agent as well. Like if you're going out, full steam, 180%, that's going to be noticed as well. Just as much as you're writing. It's showing that you believe in yourself enough to just go give it all you got, which is exactly what I'm going to entitle the name of this episode.
Yes, because a lot of people get intimidated or they get discouraged and then they start to doubt themselves. And, then when you're doubting yourself, you're sending out to the universe and that's what you're going to get back. So yeah, that's my best piece of advice to myself. It's just, you know what, go for it, because life is short. If it doesn't work out, then that path, which was not meant for you, maybe there's another path. Do I have time to tell you a quick little story?
Absolutely, sure.
So I wrote this rom-com, which after the thriller. So now I'm writing 2 different genres, and my agent tried to sell it last year and she couldn't. It got close, like it went to acquisitions. People were interested, but they kept saying it wasn't different enough to break out. So it died on sub. That's what we call it. It died. And so we had a long talk in December and she's like, I can either send it to smaller publishers or you can self-publish or you just let it die. And I love that book so much. I said, you know what, I'm going to self-publish this book. And I never in a million years thought I would do that. Like I've always said, I will never self-publish because I don't know how. I decided to do it. I looked into it. I got everything fell in place. I self-pubbed it. It's on pre-order right now. And then my agent goes, she still believed in it. She's like, do you want me to try to sell the audio, foreign, and sub rights? I was like, sure. But she said, don't expect anything because it's a self-pub book and they don't usually. Within 2 days of going on sub for audio, she had 2 offers. And then a third one came in the next day. And then 2 more houses wanted it. And then suddenly there was this huge bidding war going on. And I'm like, my mind was like absolutely blown because I'm like, I thought this book died. And now suddenly there's this bidding war and it went to auction. And it was a really brutal auction. It just kept going up and going up. People were putting in bids. 2 had to drop out because it went too high. And it was just like this crazy thing. And then finally we took the highest offer, which was 3 times the amount of the first offer. And I just like, my mind was blown because I believed in this book and I thought it died, but now it's going to be an audiobook as well as a paperback and a Kindle. And she's going to try to sell the foreign rights. So it's like, you know what? I believed in it and I put it out there. I never thought I would self-pub, but now it's going to be a book.
Well, you were putting, I think it's a situation where you're putting, I don't want to say your money where your mouth is, but you believed in it enough to put it out there.
Right.
And I think people pick up on that. They're like, wow.
It's not the traditional way to sell a book, but you know what? I made money on it already. So it covered all the self-publishing costs. And now it is going to be an audiobook and get picked up. And, so you never know. Like if you believe in it, go for it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It might be different. It might be a different path than what you thought, but something will happen.
Well, I also think that, the term traditional publishing has got to change because the publishing market has been, the industry rather, it's been so challenged by self-publishing, hybrid publishers. I imagine the next 5 years or so, we're going to see even more disruption in publishing. So.
Definitely. So now I've been published by a big 5 with an Amazon, and now I'm going to self-publish, and now I have this audio deal. So it's definitely changing. Like I never imagined I would do this. Yeah.
Well, here you are, and Someone Else's Life. Tell me, where can everybody go out and pick up Someone Else's Life?
You can get it anywhere where you can pick up books, online, Amazon. I think it's on all the retailers like Barnes & Noble, Target. Physical copies are mostly in independent bookstores, like not Barnes & Noble because they're Amazon's competitor. But it is on Barnes & Noble's and Target's websites, which is I find interesting. So basically anywhere where you can pick up a book.
All right. And then if people want to connect with you, Lyn, and learn more about you, do you have a website and social media handles you want to share?
Yeah, so I made it very easy for everybody to find me. So all my social media, website, everything, the handle is just lynliaobutler.com or Lyn Liao Butler is just the handle. So.
Well, there we go. I'll be sure to put all of that into our show notes. Lyn, thank you so much for stopping by, Uncorking a Story, and letting me uncork yours.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to Uncorking a Story. If you'd like more information about today's guest or to find out more about Mike, go to uncorkingastory.com. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, rate, and review us at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Tune in every week to hear Mike Carlin uncork a new story.